today I have the tremendous honor and pleasure to have with us Dr. Desirée Cox. So a few months ago, I think it was in September, the two of us were both speaking in the same group of speakers at RadFest Longevity Conference. And in fact, Desirée was the moderator and introduced me. So in these conferences, there's so many people that are smart, intelligent, have important things to say, but I find that in every conference, no matter how many people there are, there's usually one, maybe two or three that I gravitate toward. And no question, I gravitated toward Desirée, and it was because of her presence, one of my pillars of resilience, by the way. But there was an intelligence and a sense of strength that was paired with power, that was paired with a warmth and an opening. And I like to say that in life we either come from the heart or we come from protecting the heart. And I saw right away Desirée coming from her heart, and I knew this is somebody that I wanted to learn more about. And when I started these podcasts, she was one of the first people that I thought about. Went to her websites and looked at what she's doing, and is doing amazing things, important things, and most importantly, shows a lot of the characteristics of what I would consider a good leader. Welcome, leaders. In a world constantly evolving, true leadership requires resilience, presence, vision, and a willingness to embrace challenge and change. I'm Dr. Stephen Sideroff, and this is Quantum Leadership Podcast, where we go beyond conventional leadership to explore the principles that connect mind, body, and organizational success. Desirée, it's a pleasure to have you here with your diverse background that spans clinical medicine, the creative arts and science, a Rhodes Scholar, and founder of a number of health-based companies, while also being a virtual artist for over 20 years, in her creative practice that spans music as a jazz singer, writing of short stories and poetry, and software tech and inventions. Also, her art has been featured in Vogue magazine, and her paintings have been sold and on display in exhibits throughout the world. So, what an honor it is to be here with you, Desirée. Welcome.
Thank you so much, and thank you for those kind, beautiful words. We totally gravitated at RadFest. Very striking place. I was struck by the love there too. And that statement that you made about the heart base and love just continues to be very important to me. And I continue to see the need and put up the prayer to increase my capacity for love. There's no limit to where that can go. And I think as one grows, and as I grow, I really pray for an increase in my capacity to love.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, one of the things that happened when I went to your website, I was struck by the 3 sentences you have right facing me, 3 big sentences. And I know that since you put them there, they are so important to you. And I looked at those 3 sentences, and they also resonated with me because they tap into the very quantum effects that I'm wanting for us to explore and see how we can take advantage of them on the human level. So if you don't mind, can we take a moment to look at those 3 sentences that come straight from you? And the first one was, we live in a connected world. Of course, we know from quantum effect of entanglement and how the observer affects what's observed. So we live in a connected world. Can you say a few words about that?
Yeah, wow. That's such a big statement. cannot say where that would have come from when I wrote that, and I say that because I continue to delve deeper into the meanings of that. And where I sit now, I'm struck by, I'm struck by the Desiree, the past, the achievement, all that stuff that comes from the ego, and the ego creates a world and is important for a world with blessings. But I'm increasingly connecting and delving into that limitless potential. So for me right now, what that really symbolizes is the limitless potential, to see the limitless potential as a space, and the role that each of us have, or that I have, or the leaders have, is that we're planting these seeds in this space of limitless potential, and we're growing those seeds or cultivating those seeds in this pool of light. We're asking ourselves to be planted in that pool of light, in that space of limitless potential. And all we're doing is asking the light to be focused on particular things where we plant our seeds, but we're not manifesting. The manifesting is from the light. It's the creator that's manifesting, but we're like the gardener who's carefully focusing on the seed, what we want to grow, what we want the light to be focused on, and that the fruit, the tree that comes from that seed is going to have ripple effects for many generations, for the future. We'll have limitless potential. And that feels like it belongs to a very different world than the world where we are manifesting, we're growing, we're doing it. It's my intelligence, my wisdom, my brilliance that's doing it. That really belongs. It's not that good things don't come from that. And it's not that some of those things may or may not last, but increasingly that space, the connectedness that is, in the space of limitless potential, it brings awe for me. It's a sense of no idea, sometimes of no idea what I'm doing. And it's not my job I'm not the soil, like you wouldn't think that a gardener, grows the tree. It's the soil, the rain, all that, stuff that comes from beyond you, that belongs to the limitless potential, and therefore the connectedness in that quantum sense that you're exploring.
That's beautifully said. And the limitless potential is sort of like a quality of the quantum field. And then it's where we choose to place our focus that brings all those possibilities down to a single event, so to speak. As you're talking about this, we have tremendous responsibility to be in a good place every time we make these choices.
Oh, yeah, that is so important. Increasingly, I spend so much more time than I have done in my past on focusing on those seed moments. Those moments when you are just growing an idea. It's a new idea. Maybe you and colleagues, or you mentioned a tech platform, and you and your colleagues are coming together to grow that. So often, I can think in my past, so often I would have been focused on the technical part of it, or getting it done part of it, or the structure, the framework part of it. And more, I concentrate or really try to bring myself into the right energy for those seed moments, because everything is in those moments. Everything is in those seed moments. And there's this sense from what part of my spiritual practice is from the space of Kabbalah, and one of the great statements that the Rav makes when he talks about the seed moments is that sense of don't be you there. I really have taken that to heart. Don't be you there, the small you there, the bigger part of what your soul is here to manifest, and which is so important right at the beginning, at the seed, when you don't even know what it's going to become, when you hopes for what it might be. And it's important because I can recall a time, I'm very kind of fiery and focused, and I can recall a time when I would have been more attentive to the urgency, more attentive to, if people weren't moving at the speed that I wanted to, in the direction that I wanted to, they'd have to be sent by the wayside, they might be left in the dust. But more and more, it's like, take the time, the patience to listening, because everything is in those seed moments.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. And yes, most of the time, most of us are so in this process of stress and survival that we don't take that moment of a pause and allow the best part of ourselves to bring to the forefront to that moment, and we're on automatic behavior or we're on survival behavior. So I really appreciate all that you said to that. Your second statement, let's create a new story for ourselves. And I love that because when I work with people and I talk about resilience, one of the things that gets in all of our ways is our story. One of the things that gets in the way is the lessons learned as we grew up. And so your comment, let's create a new story for ourselves, is exactly what all of us need to do, because the old story was not created by us. It was given to us. And, let's take ownership of our story. So I love your comment about let's create a new story for ourselves.
Yeah, very, so on point what you just said. There came a point for me, and that continues because you continue to grow in that sense of the story. And I think where that would have come from when I wrote that, and it's, very relevant to, what I do, was that sense of the story of health. Have a story of health is still a part of the old paradigm that's crumbling a little, not crumbling a little, but crumbling. And this new paradigm has not yet been born. And I was very conscious of the fact that we had a story of ourselves disconnected in pieces. There's the brain, there's the heart, there's the arms, there's the liver, there's the mind. And so we had a medicine, a health paradigm that focused on the parts. And that has gotten us so far. That has had gifts, that has had advantages. But the missing piece that comes with the disconnectedness is the lack of a sense of a whole person, the whole restorative person. That what might it be? What might the new story be where we were living beyond our wildest dreams? What might the new story be where we saw ourselves as creators of new things, but creators in that broadest sense of creation? What might this new story be where we refuse to settle for the small version of ourselves, the narrow version of ourselves? What might be possible for us? Just living a story for ourselves where we're living more in the questions of what's possible than the limitations of the belief systems based on what we can and can't do, the boxes we should and should not fit into, the cautions, the fear. How would it look if I'm not the smartest person in the room? All those things that are so narrowing from us. And what might it be if we could come from a place truly not of a fake love and kindness, but, of a deep love for humanity? What might we be as a human race, as an individual, and as communities and as a species? And
you talk a lot about creativity. And when we're locked into our old story, or if we're locked in to any story, actually, it interferes with creativity, because creativity means thinking outside of the parameters that we're used to. And most of us get locked into those parameters and feel like it's not okay to go out beyond them. So that is also so very important. And finally, your third comment, let's connect the dots between the art and the science of being alive.
Yeah.
Which is really thinking outside the box. And you've done so much work in the area of creativity, but you want to share a little bit about let's connect the dots between the art and science of being alive.
One thing I began to find precious when I started to paint. I had not had an interest in art before. I was in the Bahamas doing consulting work at the time, and I kept driving down the main highway, especially at sunset, and just seeing these amazing sunsets and these colors. And I had clearly seen them as a child, but somehow they were hitting me in a different way. And I wanted to find some way to capture that. And I tried to, had someone teach me photography and all that fiddling behind lenses. Word, he wasn't speaking to me. I let it go. And then one morning I woke up from a dream that said, you need to paint. So I found an artist, a full-time artist, and said to him, I need you to teach me how to paint. He said, I don't teach anyone how to paint because they don't know how serious it is, but you are obsessive enough that I'll teach you. His process involved me just making a mark, and we would have a conversation, and he'd send me back to stay in my own voice. And I remember there's a part in that process where I began to see the potential of art as a practice for staying open. And so that zone of where it's timeless, you don't know how long you've spent, so I would have to set a timer. Would normally paint about 3-4 hours, really in the wee hours of the morning. I'd have to set a timer so that when the clock ended, I'd put the brush down. But that began to be the space where you don't know what you're going to do. It's between you and God, what is coming through. You've no idea where it's going. I'm often talking to the canvases, tell me what you're trying to be. And that began to just increase my desire around the practice of just training my mind, my brain, and my body to connect those dots between the true desire of my soul, what my mind would do, my hands, what my body was, how to express that, not knowing where you were going, feeling I would create certain mantras, there are no mistakes. Just find a way to be at that abyss and open, but have it be not something that I would talk about, something that I literally felt and had the experience of. And that somehow there was a connecting of the dots that can be a logical left brain process. But there's another level of connecting the dots where you're connecting to a higher intelligence and you're asking for what am I not seeing? What is the universe around me? The person who spoke to me yesterday, the tree that I walked past, the awkward situation that I found myself in, that seems to be something that I've been in before. What are these messages, trying to tell me that I should bring to bear on what I'm working on, what I'm thinking about, what I'm writing, what projects I'm leading in, so that there was a connecting of the dots that was coming from the soul, the light of the creator, the mind, like all of it. And I needed to learn how to not lean on my own understanding, my own wisdom, my own limitations. And so that's what I began to see that as being, as connecting the dots between the art and science of truly being alive, like being alive to all of what is possible. There's a science to it. There's a quantum science to it. There are all other aspects of the sciences to it. There is an art, because there's the art of knowing what to say, how to engage. And that most of it, you're asking for that intelligence to speak through you rather than relying on what you know, what you've read. So you're asking for another series of dimensions to come on board to connect those dots.
Beautiful, beautifully said. So, this is a podcast on leadership, and in what you just said, you highlighted really a number of aspects that I think are important for someone to be a leader and as well be a leader in their own lives. A lot of people don't have this sense of being a leader in the world, but we can all be a leader in our own lives, every one of us. And first, you talked about a ritual. And a ritual is so important. It helps us get centered. It helps us get into a positive pattern. We have plenty of negative patterns, but creating a ritual helps us get into a positive pattern. You talked about it not only being intellectual, but also in feeling, bringing the two hemispheres of the brain together so they function synchronistically is part of it. And then you're also talking about what I refer to when I talk about my third pillar, relationship with something greater, which could be having meaning in life, purpose, giving service, spirituality. But for you, I hear how that helps you open up to something new, how it allows you to go beyond. And then finally, one other thing that if I can encapsulate what you were saying, one other thing I found is so important. You said there are no mistakes. And that's something that I resonate with, because for me to start this quantum leadership podcast, knowing that, this is a new experience for myself, I had to be willing to say something very much like that. It's a learning process, a growth mindset. And so if I make a mistake, it's part of the process. And you're saying that as well. And I think all of these are characteristics of good leadership, whether it's in our own lives or in the lives of others as well.
Just to say, to add, your pillar of relationship with something else in that chapter, just to really congratulate you. It's so beautifully written. That particular chapter, the book is beautifully done, but that chapter and your navigation of the complexity of that material, just to say that is beautifully done. So just much respect to you for your work in that area.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Before I get into some other kinds of meat that we want to talk about, one of the things I'm curious about, Desirée, is that you clearly were a precocious child. You were on stage at a very early age. You were way past and beyond people that were your age. And I'm curious about that. I know in my own life, I was always the youngest in my classes. I had skipped a couple of grades, but I found that caused at times for me to feel like I was out beyond my foundation, out beyond my supports, because I didn't have as much experience as all the other people around me. And I'm wondering how you handled that, how you navigated that, because I think whatever it was that you had that allowed you to do that is a very important aspect of what we're talking about in leadership.
Yeah, that's, I had those same feelings that you're describing. And I like the way you put that, out beyond my foundation. So there was the gift, there are no mistakes. And I come back to that, and there are no recognizing that you're born into exactly the right family that you need to be born into, manifest your gifts, that you're born at exactly the right time, with exactly the right parents and exactly the right country. All of it is perfect. I did not grow up believing that. I grew up thinking, who are these people that the good Lord, that he made a mistake putting me in this family with these people in this way? I will admit that was some part of my life. But the thing that many aspects, there were many positive gifts that I think were valuable for that time of my life. One, My family, I was raised by my great-grandparents who were born in the 1890s, and my parents. My great-grandparents played a very significant role in my life, and they were farmers and fishermen, founders of Pentecostal churches. So that's their world. So that was a important spiritual grounding. Very practical people. For them it was very fancy ideas, whatever you're talking, but does it grow corn? And there also was the sense that their honest belief was there was only one book in the world you needed, and that was the Bible. All this other stuff was, it was tolerable, but, really you only need the Bible. So there was that universe that they lived in. There were my parents my mom particularly wanted her daughters there were two of us. I'm the eldest. I have a younger sister who's 3.5 years younger than me. She wanted her girls to get a good education. She wanted them to go beyond where she had gone. So there was the drive around education being a really important foundation. My dad, who was in our world, he would have been considered on the scale, could teach himself anything, taught himself French from comic books and a transistor radio, and played 5 instruments, self-taught. So I grew up with him with the sense that, and I had very similar mind and way of being to him, that you could learn anything you put your mind to, but he was not that great socially. My mom was phenomenal socially. So there was that. And then as I began to sing on stage, I had to learn, and I went to a private school. So we grew up over the hill, which is in the poorer part of town. So that's like the urban neighborhood, working class world. I went to a private school.
This is in the Bahamas?
In the Bahamas. So private school, mainly white British teachers, kind of the professionals sent their kids there. It cost my family, my mom and my dad's salary was like 2/3 of their salary went for our education. So there was that world. And then there was when I began to sing on stage publicly, I sang at churches and weddings and all sorts of events. There was the learning of engaging with audiences. So I learned very early as a singer, you had to connect with the audience. They were there to hear your beautiful voice, but you needed to connect with them. So a big part of what was naturally in the DNA of growing up was this ability to move through all these different communities with these very different ideas of how to be, how to live, what was good, what was bad, and hold your own sense of what you wanted. Hearing those lives that they wanted you to live, but being kind of persistent and slightly belligerent about what it is and clear about what it is you wanted. That came very naturally to me. And so, yes, it was a radical misfit in school, but I learned that it was okay. It didn't always feel comfortable, but I was who I was. And I had this picture that my world was outside, that I needed to get off that island. I needed to go out into the world. I needed to do these cool things I needed to learn. So I had this hunger and this curiosity for, how the world was, how did things get made? How were things put together? And I think that combination of a rich internal life, which was very much there for me as a reader, and the need to connect with other people, the challenge of doing that, I didn't find that always so easy, and the recognition of the importance of kind of observing your world. Like you were in I think, David, I'm forgetting his surname. He's a, wonderful poet, but he talks about the conversational, David White, the conversational nature of reality. And I very much felt growing up was the conversational nature of reality was my reality. And that brings for me, I think, a flexibility, the neuroplasticity, which you speak about in resilience, that comes to be, that's natural to that environment. But what's also there was an awareness that was what was going on. It wasn't just happening to me. I was aware of the need to shift gears, in order to connect to these different worlds. And that was not always easy, but you learned that if you didn't do that, you were outside of the conversation. You were outside of being part of what was there. And, that did not feel right somehow.
It sounds like you talking about an inner strength that it seems like you had very early on that allowed you to participate in these really extraordinary situations that were really challenges to you. And we know that the bigger the challenge we face, the bigger the lessons and the more we grow. Yeah. And so what I'm hearing is that you took some really big challenges, and where you are today is partly the result of how you grew from all of these challenges, which is tremendous.
I'll share a funny story about that too, which is the other side of that, which is also the blind spots. A very funny story. So I'm at McGill, and I know you were a professor there. So I was a chemistry student there, studying quantum mechanics. And first year, I would go to the physical science library, my favorite library, and I would check out all these books, and I would keep these books. Okay. And I had this rack of these overdue books, and I was I was always friends with the librarians. The librarians always loved me. I think they were like taking pity on me. They were like, oh my God, if we don't take care of this one, I mean, who knows what will become of her. I remember one of them called me aside and says, I'm looking at this list of overdue books you've got. I mean, it's almost like $80 worth of overdue fines. Why don't you bring the books back? And I said, I'm waiting for Amnesty Day. And they said, what? Like, yeah, the Amnesty Day. I said, what Amnesty? Yeah, Amnesty Day. You know, Amnesty Day, all libraries have them. Of course, in the Bahamas, because they had to deal with people like me who went and took the books and never bought them that. Once a year, they had something called Amnesty Day, and the deal was bring the books back, no questions asked, no fines. And so I assumed, you think you're open-minded, but this blind spot, which was the world was clearly, because that's how it was on my island, the whole world had something called Amnesty Day. So I'll never forget when she was astonished and explained to me there was no go home now, get those books. There's no such thing as an Amnesty Day. There was that moment of that I had made the assumption, and I had done it so it had never occurred to me that it was an assumption.
Right.
It occurred to me as, that was my world. And so I always tell that story as a reminder of how, even as expanded as we think we might be, there will be these blind spots that we have assumed the whole world clearly, because my world worked like that. The whole world clearly works like that.
Yeah. In Los Angeles, the pedestrian has the right of way. You step off into the street and cars are legally required to stop. But I'm always amazed at people who start walking across the street and simply assume that everybody in their cars is perfectly focused on the road, not daydreaming, and I'm going to see them and stop.
Yeah.
So did she give you amnesty?
She did not. She said that was meant to teach me a lesson.
Okay. So one thing, as I mentioned, it looked like it seemed like you had this strength to get up on stage. I don't know if it was scary for you or not, but you had the strength. What do you say to people that will say, well, I don't have that strength?
Yeah, for me, I was having this conversation with Dr. Jordan actually about the way in which if you have the gift, and it is a gift, the opportunity, and it is a gift to be performing, whether in an orchestra or individually as a kid on stage. It's a gift because when it comes to speaking, if you have to present on stage, it's very easy, not easy, but you can translate that, the relatedness of the comfort of being on stage, even if you were doing something else, to speaking. So that's a gift. But one thing I do remember about being on stage was the joy I had. Actually, it wasn't even joy. It was something divine that happened when I sang. So I remember singing was, you got on stage, there was the navigation of being on stage, introducing yourself, introducing the song, but that was all to get to the point of singing. And when the music started, and I would open my mouth, it was as if I disappeared. It was, and the next thing I knew was the clapping and it was over. And that connection, which was like nothing else in my world, like nothing else I experienced. It was like a pure, it's like a divine, or you can call that, it was like electricity, something divine happened to you. It was seductive is not quite the word. You had a hunger for that place. And so I remember, for me, I would do anything, really. I would tolerate any manner of annoyances that were annoyances to me, to be able to have the opportunity to have those moments. So I would say to someone who is maybe didn't have that background, didn't have that early gift, and they're now trying to speak and express themselves on stage, and it feels a little scary, is you're looking to find the motivation to train yourself to get past that, but you're looking for that moment, and it may be in the part of the content that is deeply about your truth, that is something that is deeply that you want to get out, and that when you're talking about that thing, you almost feel like a part of you disappears. It just feels like such an incredible gift to be in that place where you feel that, like I said earlier, don't be you there. It's like you feel that in that moment, you're not you, like you're connected to something beyond. And some of it might be in the story that you're looking to tell, the message that you're looking to get to, when you speak about that, if no one were watching, you would feel grateful for the opportunity to speak about that, to try to find a way to be connecting with that as you stand on the stage, and so that the rest of what's around you and the people and the noise and the internal anxiety literally fades in the background, because you're just so grateful to be able to, or if you're a funny comedian, to be able to tell that story that puts you in that place that is, again, you're connecting with something that's beyond you.
Right. Yeah. So how I would interpret some of the things that you're saying is that it's important for people to reach deeper inside themselves, to find what's meaningful in their lives and find their purpose that gives them that motivation, and then have the vision of what they want to do with it, where they want to go with it, what the results that they want to achieve, so that you have the purpose that starts the driving, but then the vision, in my experience, helps you get past the obstacles.
Yes, that's right.
A lot of people just focus on the obstacles and how difficult, and they don't fully see, or they lose clarity of what they're trying to achieve, what they want. which has in and of itself the power to pull us in that direction.
Yeah, I like the way you put that sense of what would it be like if I have this vision that someone, let's say the vision is someone in the audience sees the light and they have this insight that I'm trying to get, and that insight totally changes their life. What if that happens right in front of me? And you're right, that is able to kind of pull you towards that vision as you're speaking. It's really nicely put.
Yeah. So there are a couple of things right now I want to get to. Number one, you've created a number of companies, and I'd love to hear the driving force between you doing that. That's part of the question. You also talk about wanting healthcare for everyone, everywhere, which I love because you're saying how much you have an expanded constituency, which is what I think quantum leadership, good leadership is all about. And tell me a little bit, combining three questions in one, what would you say are the leadership qualities that you called on to achieve that?
Yeah, for me, I think it was for the HEALinc, it was almost a kind of righteous indignation that was the starting point for HEALinc. I would go to the World Stem Cell Summit, beautiful, fantastic, big summit. And they would all be talking about the new science and the new stem cell stuff, etc. And I always had this sense that, the gift of the current paradigm, the evolving paradigm, is that innovation can come from anywhere, and that it will likely come from unexpected places, people who you expect the least from. That sense was, why not have a global summit in the Bahamas? It started with that, okay? It then moved to, and I had never done something like set up a company. I had no idea what I was doing. I had the idea of the HEALinc Summit, let's say in February. It was about February or March. It was right after the World Stem Cell Summit. And by October was when I had the first summit. I had never so much as organized a dinner party before. And then the idea that you'd bring kind of 50 plus international speakers, to find a hotel, to have an event planner tell you what it is that you needed to do, to get sponsorship for all of it, to decide what the sponsorship numbers were, to ask for sponsors. It was really, all of it was like divine, a combination of, they say, the angels and the gods must have just said, oh my God, what is this? So it was all of that coming together. And then when the first summit happened, all these gifts and, divine gifts to make that happen happened. And when the summit was happening, I would walk outside the door and look in and go, oh my God, it's a real conference. Go back outside. I'm pinch myself. Beautiful. I was walking, I can't believe it's a real conference. Like I literally couldn't believe that was happening. Yeah. Now, I had to learn a couple of things. I had originally wanted that to be a space where young entrepreneurs might be matched with investors, with their new inventions, their creations. And I had to learn quickly that in fact, sponsors were not inspired by that, because these were, young people who had things that were not quite fully baked ideas. So I tweaked and pivoted to have something where all parties would be getting something out of it, and then to slip in these kind of out of the box pieces into that. So I'll say what that means. It was clear at that point the Bahamas was now the ground space for through a new law, Stem Cell Act, that allowed companies to make those products available there. So they had an interest in making sure that they could get there. So it was like, okay, that's my, part of my audience. But I then thought, I think about myself as a young kid growing up on a small island, seeing Oxford in a brochure and deciding, where it said something about, this is a place where great learning happened and the top people in the world studied and whatever. I thought, I had to be there. I have to be there. And that was before the internet and all the rest of it. It was like, what could I do that, what would inspire, that have that effect, that would pique the imagination of young students? So we had a strand that brought young science, engineering, and math students into the main summit with their teachers, with their school uniforms on, and had them ask questions of the speakers. That had an unexpectedly fantastic effect. I mean, that was such a successful element that it ended up growing to now college students, nursing students, to have them see the future and now make their choices based on that. So much of it was learning on the fly, making all sorts of mistakes on the fly, learning to delegate, learning to give many people a part in the process. People wanted to help. At first, you have your picture of how it's going to be, but you can't do it all on your own. And realizing that the more significant and impactful the thing is, the less likely you're able to do it on your own. And so it just forced me to expand. I did it pushing against the carpets and the walls because I wanted to hold on to stuff, but it just was not possible. So it grew, and that was 2018. Each year I have felt like it's required a spiritual mind, body, physical transformation to do the next year. Because each year it's like, okay, it's another hill to climb. God, how am I going to do this again? Like, oh my God. I used to say to people, I understand that a calling feels like can be painful to do it, but it's even more painful not to do it.
Well, yes. And so again, you're demonstrating some very important facts, such as whether you know what you're doing or not, whether you have the whole picture or not, get moving, and take a step forward, because the growth begins when you do that, and the progress begins when you do that. I also hear that you have the ability to inspire, and that was part of how you can do what you did. But I'm also curious, as you just said, you can't do it alone. And so here it takes relationship, and here it requires other people. Can you say a few words about what you brought to the table that facilitated relationship, facilitated getting other people to get on board to your story, to what you were trying to do?
It involved, in the summit, and has grown, it always involved a lot more talking than I imagined. So it meant, calling up speakers and trying to hear what they were trying to do. So my thinking was, okay, what would bring someone, because I've had speakers from all over the world, we don't have the kind of budget that would give them huge honoraria. So I had to learn what would be a motivation for you as a speaker to find this valuable. So I would speak to every speaker. So that was the first part, is getting speakers to be inspired and interested in.
Did you ask them that question?
I would ask them the question.
Okay.
I would have individual calls with all of them. What are you trying to do with your company? What is it that you're looking to achieve? How might this summit help you with that? What would make this worth your while in terms of so? And I would be hearing that, and I'd hear how much what they were trying to do, what kind of, and I had to work out the length of the talk, because you had to fit it all in these 3 days. So that was one part, to get speakers to come. The second part was to, I have a wonderful, assistant who is very smart young girl and, really begun early on to see my role as a mentor in that role. I hadn't intended for that to be the case, but I could see this was leadership mentoring. So that was for her part. Then for sponsors, it would be the same sort of thing. And then the other part was getting attendees to come. I continue to be learning about that. And more recently, the gift of volunteers have come on board. So the volunteers have been really interesting. I started to be able to have one of the members of the team, Dr. Philippe, manage the volunteers, but I started to hear that people wanted to learn more, that they wanted to be a part of a community. These were people who were outliers themselves. They felt themselves to be outliers and were looking for the community. And I was like, this is an opportunity to get volunteers. They can participate. They will come in free. They will learn from speakers. They can chat. So there's that. So each year, I would say in terms of getting people on board, I'm more of an introvert than it would appear. I continue to but I continue to grow and learn and expand on how to draw people to the cause. And the cause continues to evolve. Like each year you're listening, what's really working? Like when people come back to you, they say, oh, this warmed my heart. This was really fantastic. I learned so much. It was just like, okay, so that is what, this is what is a pull, and this is inspiring them. So all of it is, how can I, get myself out of the way more and more and more, so that what is trying to be in this space can live? And how can I learn to hear more of who needs to be a part of this, who wants to be and who needs to be a part of it, so that your aim is to just plant the seed. You're just planting this and watching it grow, planting the seed, stepping out of the way. That's an ongoing journey.
And it's a very collaborative one. Very collaborative. This has been such a fascinating conversation and amazing information, but time is going by fast. So we only have a few minutes left. I know you've got HEALinc and you have HEALinc 360. And these are powerful programs of yours. In the last few minutes, what would you like to focus in on here?
Sure. So I would say we have our summit that's annual. The 2025 summit is going to be in the Bahamas, the 27th, the 29th of April. So that's www.HEALinc summit.com. And you can register, you can join us. I think it's a space where people who want to know more about the new medicine, but also want to know where they can get and access some of these new treatments, and who to trust and what's valuable. That's the place to hear it. And we also combine an art exhibition that's a part of it, to connect those dots between left and right brain. HEALinc 360, that's HEALinc 360, is where you can continue the conversation. You can see videos from previous summits. It's a membership thing, and we have a newsletter. So that's how you stay with the community. And those are the primary things, I think. If you're seeing the new medicine, you have an interest in that, you have a curiosity about it, and you're interested in the kind of medicine that is about restoring and regenerating your mind and body in ways that are less toxic and in ways that nudge the body to heal itself. This is a place to come, to learn, and to find out who to get those therapies from, And I'd love to see you there. I'd love to have our team connect with you. So just go online and sign up.
Great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time today to be here on this podcast with me, Desiree. The information that you've conveyed and really your model of a good leader that's, looks at relationship, looks at collaboration, reaches deeper inside, looks for what's beyond. All of these aspects are beautifully represented within you of good leadership. So thank you. And I know your website is DesireeCox.com. So that's right. A place that all of the information can be found there. So I encourage everybody to go there. And again, thank you. And thank you, everybody in the audience, for being here and being interested in finding how you could be a better leader in your life. And share this information with others because it's important information. Thank you very much.
You, Stephen.
Thank you, everybody, for joining me on this Quantum Leadership podcast. I hope today's conversation has inspired you to think bigger, lead more authentically, and take steps toward meaningful change. If you've enjoyed this episode, please share it with others and make sure you subscribe and go to my website, drstephensideroff.com. Thank you again.